Authors Week continues on Mornings at 1 every day this week. We're bringing in an author to talk about a book that has New York connections. Today, a deep dive into one of the city's best-known newspaper reporters. In the book, Jimmy Breslin, The Man Who Told the Truth, author Rich Esposito pens the first biography of this famous columnist, a native New Yorker. In the book, Rich writes, Breslin was a reporter and poet equally. He was able to get you to see and also to feel what the victims of poverty and injustice were stuck with. And he did that by putting you in the scene with them, to feel through their eyes what was in their hearts. Rich is with us in studio this morning. Congratulations on the book.
Thanks so much. Morning.
You started working on this a decade ago, roughly.
Yeah, back when I was at NBC, I decided I'd start work on a project for myself. So I checked yesterday. I first interviewed Jimmy in 2015. So that's when I began the project.
And he died a couple of years later, but you had some good conversations prior to his death that was really a grounding for this book.
It was really big help to have had a chance to go over the material with him at that point in his life, when he was in his 80s.
And Jimmy covered some of the big stories. I mean, over the course of decades, the JFK assassination, the killer from the Son of Sam killings. He published that letter and got a bit of blowback from it. What's so interesting about Jimmy is he didn't care how powerful you were, how political you were. He was gonna tell everyone the truth about you.
That was his thing. In many ways, Jimmy lived his column. That was his whole life, from the minute he woke up to the minute he went to sleep. He just was going to work for you. And it was a pretty phenomenal thing, as you guys know, in the business of journalism. That's a great commitment, you know?
I mentioned this in the intro, that he really worked to find a different way to tell the story. And we found a clip in the archives. He was talking about the way that he covered the funeral procession for JFK. And he did so not by lining up along the funeral procession, not by talking to a federal official, but by going to the gravesite and talking to the guy who dug the grave. And here's Jimmy explaining what his process was there.
Moved the dirt around the grave, and he looked at it, he said, "It's an honor to have done this." And that was it. That was the day. But it was the only story about anything that wasn't just tears and measured strides, followed the casket.
As you read his old columns, how often did you see that technique?
The technique was one he used throughout his 50 years. And he used it in exactly that same way, to get you to feeling the emotion of the day and seeing what you really needed to see. If you read everything on JFK's assassination, and you just read this one column, you realize you've learned everything you need to know about the pain of Jackie, the pain of the children, and the pain of the country. And he captures it through a man who puts on his overalls, eats his eggs, goes to the cemetery, digs the hole, doesn't even get to see the president put into the grave. He says, "I'll come back when they're all gone." And that's how he captures it for you.
He was always giving a voice to the voiceless. And this was a guy from Queens, working class roots, and he really told the story of his fellow New Yorkers to other New Yorkers.
He only talked to you. And when you read it, you thought you were the only reader. I read everything. I read 3,500 of his columns. We collected them, had to go find them because he lost them all, of course, in his floods. He lived in Far Rockaway, the floods, whatever. But he really just talked to you, the reader, and he brought you right into the pain or the joy of whoever he was writing about.
And I think it's important to characterize the degree of influence that the newspaper columnists had in those days. We did a feature yesterday on a book that was about the heyday of TV news in the 70s and 80s. And this was similar, right? Everybody on the subway had the paper, and everybody at some point passed across Jimmy Breslin's column.
And you could hear the pages turning. I mean, even now, if you think back, you can feel a subway car filled with people turning the pages. Some turn from the back looking at sports, some turn from the front looking at news, some go to the horoscope. And that's the morning for everybody riding in, all 5 million subway riders, the rides every day that we all take. That was who he spoke to. And when they got off the train,
Yeah.
They all had something to talk about.
Well, look, if you were the mayor and Jimmy was against you that morning, then
Woo!
it wasn't a good day at City Hall,
Not a
right?
good day. Not a good day at all.
Thanks for coming in this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We'll take a break here. We want to remind you that that the book about Jimmy Breslin is available now in your neighborhood bookstore. Coming up tomorrow, we continue with Authors Week. Chef Caroline Cho and her book Banchan, a closer look at Korean side dishes. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. For more stories in your communities, click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV for the latest news and weather updates every 10 minutes and more. We'll see you then.